The phone that rang was not a studio phone. It was not a producer's phone. It was not a prop. It was Steve Harvey's personal cell phone, the one he keeps in his left jacket pocket, the one only 11 people on Earth have the number to, the one that has never rung during a taping in 17 years because Steve Harvey turns it off before every single episode and has not missed that step once since 2007. But on June 28, 2024, at 3:22 in the afternoon, in the middle of a fast money round, while a 34-year-old welder named Jerome Washington from Beaumont, Texas, was waiting for his second answer to be revealed, Steve Harvey's left pocket started vibrating. Steve's hand went to his jacket. His face changed. Not surprise, recognition. He knew who was calling because only 11 people could be calling, and when he pulled the phone out and looked at the screen, his entire body went still. He held up one hand to the producers. He held up one hand to the audience. He answered the phone on the stage of Family Feud in front of 214 people and said, "I'm in the middle of a show." The voice on the other end spoke for 4 seconds. Steve Harvey's knees buckled. He grabbed the podium with his free hand. The phone almost fell. Jerome Washington, still standing at the fast money board with his answers on the screen, took a step toward Steve and said, "You all right, Mr. Harvey?" Steve was not all right. He looked at Jerome, a man he'd met 40 minutes ago, a man who had just told the audience he was playing to win money for his mother's house, and said, "That was your mother. She's on my phone." Jerome's face went blank. His wife, Tamika, standing with the family behind the podium, said, "That's not possible." It was possible, and the reason it was possible, the chain of events that put a stranger's dying mother on Steve Harvey's personal cell phone in the middle of a live taping, would take 360 million people across 49 countries approximately 11 minutes to understand, and the rest of their lives to forget. And that wasn't even the part that made Steve cry. Jerome Darnell Washington was born on March 3, 1990, in the back bedroom of a shotgun house on Harriet Street in Beaumont, Texas, because his mother, Loretta Mae Washington, refused to go to the hospital. Not because she couldn't afford it, though she couldn't, because Loretta Mae Washington was a woman who believed, deeply, stubbornly, in a way that exhausted everyone who loved her, that the important things in life happen at home. Births happen at home. Deaths happen at home. Prayers happen at home. And the house on Harriet Street, with its sagging porch and water-stained ceiling and kitchen that smelled like Fabuloso and cornbread every day of the year, was the axis around which Loretta organized the entire world. She raised Jerome alone. His father, a pipefitter named Darrell, left when Jerome was 3 and sent money twice, once in 1994 and once in 1997. Both times it was $200 in a Hallmark card with no return address. Loretta worked at a commercial laundry facility on College Street, feeding sheets into industrial pressing machines for $9.40 an hour, 45 hours a week, for 26 years. Her hands were scarred from steam burns so old they'd turned white. She had arthritis in both wrists by 40. She wrapped them with ace bandages every morning before work and unwrapped them every night. And Jerome would watch her wince when she flexed her fingers, and she would say, "I'm fine, baby. Hands just tired." Her hands were not tired. Her hands were damaged. But Loretta Mae Washington did not use the word damaged for anything in her house. Not the ceiling, not the porch, not her body, not her son. The house on Harriet Street had been in Loretta's family for 41 years. Her mother, Earlene, had bought it in 1983 for $11,000 from a couple who were moving to Houston. Earlene died in 2003 in the same back bedroom where Jerome was born. The house passed to Loretta. By 2010, it needed a new roof. By 2015, it needed foundation work. By 2020, the porch had sunk 4 inches on the left side. The bathroom had a leak that had turned the subfloor soft, and the electrical panel in the hallway was so outdated that an inspector from the city told Loretta it was a fire hazard and gave her 90 days to bring it up to code or face condemnation proceedings. The estimate for the full repair, roof, foundation, plumbing, electrical, was $67,000. Loretta's annual income was $22,000. She applied for a home repair grant through the City of Beaumont's Housing Assistance Program. Denied. Property assessed value does not meet minimum threshold for rehabilitation investment. She applied for a USDA rural repair loan. Denied. Applicant income exceeds 50% of area median income by $412. She applied for a Habitat for Humanity critical repair program. Waitlisted. Position on the list, 47. Estimated wait time, 3 to 4 years. The city's 90-day deadline did not wait 3 to 4 years. On day 86, Loretta received a second notice. Failure to remediate cited violations will result in condemnation and mandatory vacancy of the property. She told Jerome she was handling it. She told her church she was fine. She told her sister Delphine in Port Arthur that the city had given her an extension. None of it was true. She had no extension. She had no plan. She had a house her mother had bought, and her grandson had been born in, and she was 4 days from being told to leave it. But the real story hadn't even started yet. Jerome was not supposed to know. He was living in a rented duplex on the other side of Beaumont with Tamika and their 2 daughters, Aaliyah, who was 7, and Jade, who was 4. He worked as a welder at a fabrication shop on the Port Arthur Highway, making $21 an hour, 50 hours a week when the work was steady. The work was not always steady. He was good at welding the way some people are good at things that require patience and heat and the ability to hold still while something burns, naturally, quietly, without making it a personality. He'd been doing it since he was 18, when a man at a job fair at Westbrook High School handed him a pamphlet and said, "You've got steady hands." Jerome looked at the pamphlet and said, "What's it pay?" The man said, "More than your mama makes." Jerome signed up that afternoon. He found out about the condemnation notice on a Sunday in March 2024, when he stopped by the house on Harriet Street to fix a leaking faucet and found the city's second notice taped to the front door. He peeled it off, read it on the porch, and sat down on the sunken left side and didn't get up for 30 minutes. When Loretta came to the door, she saw him holding the notice and her face collapsed. Not in surprise, but in defeat. The expression of a woman who had been carrying a secret and just watched it fall. "How long?" Jerome said. 4 days, Loretta said. Jerome went home, sat at his kitchen table, and did the math. $67,000. He had $8,000 in savings. Tamika's nursing assistant salary added another $32,000 a year. But after rent, car payments, insurance, daycare for Jade, and groceries, there was nothing left. He applied for a home equity line of credit on his duplex. Denied. He was renting, not owning. He applied for a personal loan. Denied. Debt-to-income ratio exceeds qualifying threshold. He called 6 contractors to ask about phased repairs. Just the electrical first, just enough to satisfy the city. The cheapest quote for the electrical alone was $14,000. The audience thought that was the peak. They were wrong. On the Monday after he found the notice, Jerome drove to the city housing office. He brought the denial letters. He brought Loretta's income documentation. He brought the inspector's original report and the contractor estimates and a folder of photographs showing the house's condition. He sat in a waiting room for 3 hours. When he was called, he explained the situation to a housing program coordinator named Mrs. Delacroix. She listened. She looked at the file. She said, "Mr. Washington, I understand your situation, but the program guidelines are clear. The assessed value of the property is below our investment threshold. We can't allocate rehabilitation funds to a property the city has already flagged for condemnation." Jerome said, "My grandmother bought that house in 1983. I was born in it. My mother has lived in it for 41 years. Mrs. Delacroix said, "I understand, but the guidelines don't account for that." Jerome said, "Then the guidelines are wrong." Mrs. Delacroix said nothing. Jerome left. He sat in his truck in the parking lot and called Tamika and told her everything. Tamika was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "We'll figure it out." She didn't know how. Neither did he. Aaliyah, his 7-year-old, asked him that night why he looked sad. Jerome said he wasn't sad. Aaliyah said, "Daddy, your face is doing the thing." Jerome said, "What thing?" Aaliyah said, "The thing where you look like Grandma when she says she's fine but she's not fine." Jerome picked Aaliyah up, held her against his chest, and said nothing for a long time. In April, Tamika's co-worker at the hospital, a woman named Shanice, submitted the Washington family for Family Feud. She did it because Tamika had mentioned the house situation in the break room, and Shanice had said, "What if you won the money?" Tamika had laughed. Shanice had not laughed. Shanice went home and filled out the application that night. The team was Jerome, Tamika, Jerome's cousin Derek, Tamika's brother Antoine, and Shanice. When they were selected, Jerome told Loretta he was going to be on television. Loretta said, "What for?" Jerome said, "We're going to play Family Feud, and we're going to win, and I'm going to fix your house." Loretta said, "Boy, you can't fix that house with game show money." Jerome said, "Watch me." What Jerome did not know, what he would not learn until Steve Harvey's personal phone rang on live television, was that Shanice had done something else. Like Tamika's co-worker, like the friend who writes the letter, like the person in every one of these stories who sees a crack in someone's life and decides to reach inside it, Shanice had included a note with the application. The note told Loretta's story. The house, the condemnation, the denials, the 41 years. A producer read it. That producer made a phone call. That phone call went to a construction company in Houston. That construction company was owned by a man named Roy Mitchell, a 61-year-old contractor who had been watching Family Feud clips on YouTube for 3 years and had once told his wife, "If Steve Harvey ever calls me, I'm dropping everything." Steve Harvey called him. Roy Mitchell dropped everything. And here is the part about the phone. Loretta Mae Washington was in the back bedroom of the house on Harriet Street on June 28, 2024, the day of the taping. She was not watching television. She didn't have cable. She was lying in bed because her wrists hurt and her back hurt, and the city had given her a final extension of 30 days, and she was on day 27. A woman from her church, Sister Carolyn, was sitting with her. Sister Carolyn's phone rang. It was the Family Feud production office. They asked to speak to Loretta. They told her something. They gave her a phone number. Loretta dialed it with arthritic fingers on a borrowed phone. The number she dialed was Steve Harvey's personal cell phone. She didn't know that. She just knew someone told her to call, and she called. Steve would later call what happened next the most important moment of his career. The Washington family played against the Park family from Portland, Oregon. They played hard. Steve joked about Derek's gold chain. Antoine gave an answer so wrong the entire studio collapsed in laughter. They won. Fast money. Jerome and Tamika played. Jerome went first. He gave 5 answers in 20 seconds. He was precise, mechanical, controlled. The way a man is when $20,000 stands between his mother's house and a condemnation order. He scored 136 points. Tamika stepped up. She scored 72. 208 points. $20,000. The board lit up. The confetti fell. Jerome grabbed Tamika and lifted her off the ground and spun her in a circle. And when he put her down, his face was wet, and he said, into her shoulder, loud enough for the microphone to catch, "That's the electrical. That's the electrical done." $20,000. He needed 67. He'd gotten 20. The electrical was 14. He was already calculating what was left. Foundation, roof, plumbing. The math still didn't work, but it was closer, and closer was everything. And then Steve Harvey's phone rang. The studio fell completely silent. Steve pulled the phone from his pocket. He looked at the screen. He answered it. He listened for 4 seconds. His knees buckled. He grabbed the podium. Jerome stepped toward him. "You all right, Mr. Harvey?" Steve looked at Jerome. "That was your mother. She's on my phone." Tamika said, "That's not possible." Steve put the phone on speaker. The volume filled the studio. "Jerome?" Loretta's voice, thin, shaking, thick with something between terror and wonder. "Jerome, baby. They told me to call this number. They told me something. Baby, are you listening?" Jerome's hands were at his sides. His fingers were opening and closing. "I'm here, Mama. They said a man is coming to fix the house. They said a whole crew is coming. They said somebody paid for everything. Jerome, is that true? Is that real?" The studio fell completely silent for the second time. Steve Harvey looked at Jerome. "It's real. I made a phone call 3 weeks ago. A contractor named Roy Mitchell from Houston is bringing a crew of 22 people to your mother's house on Monday morning. Full renovation, roof, foundation, plumbing, electrical, new porch, everything. The entire 67,000. Covered. Done." Jerome Washington did not fall. He did not collapse. He did something worse. He stood perfectly still, completely rigid, every muscle locked, and tears ran down his face without a single other part of his body moving. He looked like a man who had been holding a building up with his bare hands for months, and somebody had just slid a foundation underneath it, and he couldn't let go yet because his body didn't believe it was safe to stop. Loretta's voice came through the speaker again. "Jerome, baby, say something." Jerome opened his mouth. Nothing came out. He tried again. Nothing. Tamika put her hand on his back. Derek grabbed his shoulder. Antoine was bent over behind the podium with his hands on his knees. On the third try, Jerome said, "Mama, you don't have to leave the house." The sound Loretta made, through the phone speaker, across 170 miles of Texas, from a back bedroom where she'd given birth and watched her mother die and wrapped her wrists every morning for 20 years, was the sound of a woman hearing the one sentence she needed to hear. She said, "Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Jesus." She said it 7 times, each time quieter. On the 7th time, it was barely a whisper. The studio fell completely silent for the 3rd time. The crew was crying, every one. A camera operator named Maria Santos later said she had to switch to a wide shot because her hands were shaking too badly for a close-up. Steve walked to Jerome. He put both hands on the man's shoulders. He didn't speak right away. When he did, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Let me tell you something. I need you to hear me. An old man at a gas station told me something once that saved my life. He said, 'God's got a plan bigger than your pain.' I was broken. I was in my car. I had nothing. And I held on to those words for years. Steve paused. But your mama, she held on to something bigger. She held on to a house, not because it was worth money. It wasn't worth money. The city told her it was worthless. The programs told her it was below threshold. But she held on to it because your grandmother's hands touched those walls, and your first breath happened in that back bedroom, and that house is not a building. It's a birth certificate. It's proof that your family was here. But Steve wasn't done. He turned to the camera. He was still holding Jerome's shoulders. I want to talk to Roy Mitchell right now. A producer brought a second phone. Steve dialed. Roy Mitchell answered from his office in Houston. Roy, I'm on stage with Jerome Washington. His mother is on the phone. I need you to tell this family, directly, what's happening on Monday. Roy Mitchell's voice came through clear and steady. Jerome, Mrs. Washington, my name is Roy Mitchell. I've been building and fixing houses in Texas for 37 years. On Monday morning, I'm bringing 22 of my people to Harriet Street. We're going to lift that house, pour a new foundation, replace the roof, rewire the electrical, replumb the bathrooms, fix the porch, and paint every wall your mother wants painted. And when we're done, the city of Beaumont can take their condemnation notice and frame it as a souvenir, because that house isn't going anywhere. The audience erupted. Loretta was crying on the phone. Jerome finally moved. He bent at the waist, put his hands on his knees, and exhaled like a man who'd been holding his breath since March. But Steve wasn't done. He turned to the Park family, the family that had lost. He looked at Susan Park, the mother. Ma'am, what do you want to say? Susan Park crossed the stage. She was small, quiet, precise. She took Jerome's hands and said, My parents came to this country from Korea with nothing. We lived in a one-bedroom apartment for 6 years. My mother scrubbed that apartment until the floors shone, because it was ours, and it mattered. Your mother's house matters, and you matter for fighting for it. Steve gave the Park family their own $20,000 prize. Both families stood together. Loretta was still on speaker. She could hear the applause. She said, Is that for us? Jerome said, That's for you, Mama. Loretta said, Lord, I wish I could see it. Jerome said, I'll bring you the tape. Steve looked into the camera. Everyone watching at home, you know a house like Loretta's. You know a porch that sinks and a ceiling that stains, and a mother who wraps her wrists every morning and says she's fine. She is not fine. The house is not fine. And the system that was supposed to help told her she was below threshold. Below threshold. Let me tell you something. No mother who raised a son like Jerome Washington is below any threshold. Pick up the phone. Call your city. Call your neighbor. Call a contractor. One phone call. That's all it takes. Ask Roy Mitchell. The clip reached 170 million views in 33 hours. Within 12 days, it passed 400 million. The hashtag Harriet Street trended in 52 countries. Roy Mitchell's construction company received over 9,000 emails in the first week, including 411 from homeowners facing condemnation proceedings who had been denied repair assistance. Roy hired 14 additional crew members to handle the volume. The renovation began on Monday, July 1, 2024. 22 workers arrived at the house on Harriet Street at 6 in the morning. Loretta was standing on the sunken porch in her bathrobe. She had baked a pound cake at 4 in the morning because she said, "You don't let people work on your house without feeding them." The renovation took 19 days. Loretta did not leave the property for a single one of them. She sat in a lawn chair in the yard and watched every nail, every board, every wire. When a worker asked if she wanted to go inside and rest, she said, "I've been resting. I want to watch my house come back." The Harriet Street Foundation was incorporated in September 2024. In its first year, it funded emergency home repairs for over 280 low-income homeowners facing condemnation or code violation proceedings across Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. It created a rapid response partnership with 12 construction firms that committed to donating labor for critical repairs, electrical, structural, roofing, for homeowners who had been denied government assistance. By the end of the second year, the foundation had saved over 400 homes from condemnation. It lobbied successfully in 3 Texas municipalities to revise the assessed value threshold policy that had been used to deny rehabilitation funds to families like the Washingtons. The same policy that told Loretta her house wasn't worth saving. Steve Harvey spoke about the Washington family in an interview 15 months after the episode aired. He said, "My phone has never rung during a taping. 17 years, not once. I turn it off every single time. And on that one day, June 28th, I forgot. For the first time in 17 years, I forgot to turn off my phone. And Loretta Mae Washington called me. You can call that a coincidence. I call it God picking up the phone." The house on Harriet Street has a new roof. It has a level porch. It has an electrical panel that passes code. It has plumbing that works. The ceiling in the living room no longer stains. The back bedroom, where Erlene died in 2003, where Jerome was born in 1990, where Loretta wrapped her wrists every morning, has a new window that faces the magnolia tree in the front yard. Loretta says the light comes in different now. She says it's softer. Jerome says it's the same light, and Loretta says, "Boy, don't tell me about my own light." They argue about it. Jerome drives to Harriet Street every Sunday after church. He brings Aaliyah and Jade. Aaliyah is 8 now. She sits on the new porch with Loretta and asks her questions about Erlene. Jade, who is 5, has started calling the house Grandma's Castle. Loretta says that's ridiculous. Loretta also says it every time she answers the phone. "You've reached the castle." She has never once admitted the connection. A phone rings in the middle of a television taping. It should not ring. It has never rung. A man answers it because something told him to answer it. And on the other end is a woman in a back bedroom in a house the city says is worthless, holding a borrowed phone with arthritic fingers, asking if it's true, asking if somebody is really coming, asking the question every person who has ever been told they are below threshold eventually asks, "Is this real?" And the answer, carried across a studio stage and through a speaker and over 170 miles of Texas highway and into a bedroom that has held births and deaths and prayers and silence. The answer is yes. It's real. Someone is coming. The house stands. The porch is level. The light comes in different. And the phone, the one that should never have rung, the one that broke every rule, that phone did exactly what phones are supposed to do. It connected 2 people who needed each other at the exact moment the world said it was impossible. If this story made you pick up your phone, subscribe and turn on notifications. We find the calls that change everything.